Welcome to Psychology of Close Relationships again. Last week, we talked about nonverbal communication. We basically investigated or examined different theories and research on topics such as social distancing or immediate emotional cues, and how our body positioning, our social distancing might influence our relationships. Now, today, we will move on to the other side of communication, the complementary side of the communication, which is verbal communication. So when we say verbal communication, social psychological research has a very classical topic, which is called self-disclosure. Self-disclosure can be defined as the process of conveying personal information to another person. So self-disclosure means you disclose, you open up about your private thoughts, feelings to another person. But of course, when a new relationship starts, we do not talk about every deep aspect of ourselves. So there is there are different stages that nonverbal communication develops one from the other. And these stages were formalized by Altman and Taylor by the name social penetration theory. Social penetration refers to the karşılıklı reciprocal behaviors that occur among individuals in the development of an interpersonal relationship. So communication is a reciprocal process. One says something about himself, the other says something about herself, and so on. So this is reciprocity. So the communication, the style of communication throughout the relationship advances, changes its character time to time. And as the relationship develops, communication involves deeper sharing of personal information. So we do not start with sharing our deepest thoughts in any relationship most of the time. Now, this is a graphic representation of these different stages by Altman and Taylor in social penetration theory. The first circle, the outermost circle, represents the start of a relationship. This is called the orientation stage or step. Then comes an exploratory affective exchange stage. They call this exchange because verbal communication is an exchange. It's a give and take between two people, okay? Then as the circle gets smaller and smaller, the relationship gets more intimate, and the disclosure of self-related information becomes deeper and wider, let's say. And then comes the affective exchange stage, and then comes the stable exchange stage. Now, what are these different stages? These four stages start with orientation stage, in which two people at the very start of the relationship have only small talk on mundane issues. So we talk about daily issues first. We make chit chat, okay? This is typical sohbet in any topic without sharing any personal ideas or feelings or any deeper self-involved issues. Then, as the time moves on and as people get closer to each other, there comes the exploratory affective exchange. Now, as the name implies, there is some exchange of affective information about the self. Always remember the name self-disclosure. There are two people in the relationship. One is the communicator, the other is the receiver. So the communicator discloses information about himself or herself to the perceiver, okay? So in the exploratory affective exchange, communication gets a bit deeper on moderate topics such as people exchange their attitudes, their political views, their education and personal problems. This is a typical verbal exchange or communication observed in casual friendship as casual friendship develops. In the affective exchange stage, the relationship a little bit more closer, and intimacy, trust, and comfort in exchanging secrets appear, and also the criticism starts. So remember, we have two people in the communication process. Now, in the affective exchange process, there is more intimacy. People feel psychologically close to each other. So there is trust and comfort experienced in the exchange, in the verbal communication. And people start, or let's say the communicator starts to inform the other person about his or her secrets and when you reveal your secrets to another person, it means that there are things which others might not approve of. So since the relationship had already gone deeper, the other person might start providing criticisms, and also the communicator can provide some criticisms to the other person. In the final stable exchange stage, people get to know each other well. Now, this is a very deep relationship. They can read even their nonverbal cues about feelings, and the most intimate sharing is observed in the stable exchange. So, the nature or the quality of communication changes and develops and improves, let's say, as it becomes deeper and wider, as the relationship gets more and more close. So this takes time, as you would appreciate. Now, how is the sharing of information observed early in a relationship and as the relationship develops? As you observe here, the amount of information and the depth, the importance of information shared with the other person is very low at the start of a relationship. Remember, the inner circle means very intimate level, okay? So in this early relationship, in the superficial, yüzeysel, superficial level, people talk about mundane things, okay? Mundane issues, daily issues. But as the relationship develops, more intimate and very intimate information is shared. And as you observe here on the right side of the picture, as you observe, this sharing of information gets wider, more topics are discussed, and deeper issues are communicated by the people. So this getting deeper of the conversation gets deeper in two aspects, breadth and depth. Breadth refers to the number of different topics exchanged or communicated. So people talk about many different topics. And depth refers to the importance of topics to the communicators. So your very intimate secrets are revealed when the relationship gets very intimate in time, okay? So this is, as you might appreciate, this is kind of making the social interaction smoother. So at the start of a relationship, if you talk about every inner deep secret of yourself, it is possible that someone who is right at that moment is a stranger might disapprove you at this point, okay? So this might cause rejection. So people choose a strategy to share personal information through self-disclosing in such a manner that in time, when people get to know each other, they can tolerate their perhaps unacceptable or unapprovable aspects. So at the very start of the relationship, people choose unimportant topics so that a relationship develops without experiencing any rejection. And when you get deeper, probability of rejection decreases because people get to know each other well. They may criticize each other, they may share their secrets and so on, but they know that they can trust each other, and they know that rejection is not simply disregarding the other individual, but any criticism is kind of a corrective, friendly behavior. So that's a very plausible, logical strategy in developing relationships in terms of verbal communication. Taylor and Altman examined this theory under the so-called exchange theory framework. Exchange theory in social psychology is a behavioristic account of social relationships. Remember, according to behaviorism, behaviors are either rewarded or punished through different kinds of stimuli, and as a behavior gets rewarded, it gets strengthened, and if it is punished, it is extinguished. So verbal communication is a two-way process, and if you say something and receive an approval, it's kind of reward and you exchange more, okay, and you like the other person more. If the person has negative comments for what you share with him or her, then you would perhaps consider not telling any kind of thing in the future to that person, so you withdraw a little bit and so on. So at the start of this communication research, the behavioristic approach was dominant, which was called in general the exchange theory. So that in exchange theory, there are costs and rewards of doing things. So in communication, revealing your personal information might have rewards in return or punishments, okay? So they put their theory in this exchange theory framework, and they conducted an experiment to test whether rewarding by the listener or punishing by the listener is a way of liking the other person. So two people are communicating. This person discloses himself or herself. That person either rewards or punishes. So what does this person think about that person? Okay. So this is important because the way we communicate with other people and how they react to the content of our communications determines how the relationship will go or end. So if we receive rewards, we like people. When we like people, we approach them. If we receive punishments, then we dislike people. And if we dislike people, we avoid them. Okay. So this is typical behavioristic point of view. So in this experiment, participants engaged in communication in 4 periods. So 4 blocks of communication, okay? By choosing among pre-arranged topics. There were different topics which were provided to the participants, and they chose among different topics to talk about to another person and discussed each topic for a self-chosen period of time, okay? But there were 4 different conditions in the experiment which manipulated the nature of reward and cost or punishment, in other words. There were 2 conditions in which rewards were manipulated. Remember, there were 4 periods of discussion, okay? And in continuous positive reward condition, the confederate provided rewards or verbal approvals to the communicator, the participant or the subject, okay, in all of the 4 of communication periods, okay, exchange periods. So this is called continuous reward. I say something and the confederate approves me with his or words, okay? When 80% of the time. So in each of the 4 periods, confederate approved the ideas 80% of the time, okay? In later positive manipulation or condition, confederate approved ideas only in the 4th period. So for 3 periods, the subject discloses something, discusses some topics, but the confederate does not approve nor punish the person. But at the 4th period, the confederate provides reward, verbal approval. There were similar 2 other conditions which manipulated the costs or the punishments. In continuous negative, the participant discussed on pre-chosen topics for 4 periods again, and in each period, 80% of the time, the confederate disapproved the content, the ideas, okay? Now this is social punishment. And in later negative condition, the confederate just listened for 3 periods, and at the 4th period, he disapproved the ideas, okay? So what's the basic expectation? As behavioristic or as behavior theory would suggest, the basic expectation was that whenever there were rewards or in continuous positive and later positive conditions, people would like the confederate more as compared to continuous negative and later negative conditions. And most importantly, if you are rewarded for talking about yourself, then you would talk about yourself more. So the strength of the behavior should increase. Therefore, the second dependent variable was the amount of time spent on talking. And as you would appreciate, people liked the confederate more when he provided continuous positive or later positive rewards, but they liked the confederate less when there were punishment in either continuous or non-continuous manner. What about time spent on talking? Now, in this graph, which is taken from this experiment, you observe the development of speech time, okay? How much we talk to another person, if he or she approves us or disapproves us. Now, look at these 2 lines. The first one, at the very start, people talk a little about a specific topic, only about, let's say, 27 or 26 seconds. So you choose a topic, exams at school, for instance, as a college student, and you talk about it for 25 seconds on the average. At the start, people speak less, but as the periods go as the periods go on, at the fourth period, as you observe, people start talking more, 40 seconds on the average, let's say, okay, if the Confederate rewarded them either continuously or at the end of the fourth period. So here you observe that in communication, when self-disclosing is rewarded by the other person, we start talking more and more about ourselves. We self-disclose more, in other words. Now look at the other conditions, later negative continuous conditions. Now what we here again observe is that on the average, people talk around 25 to 30 seconds, but as you observe at the fourth period, when they are not rewarded, they have somewhat lower time for speaking, okay? So being rewarded for disclosing oneself to another person increases the time for sharing ideas about oneself. Now this is about the breadth of speech. You talk about more topics, and breadth of it, you talk about them more. So this graph shows how our communication changes its character in interaction, in continuous interaction. This is, of course, one explanation to why we choose to verbally communicate with other people in different topics or in different ways. Ayres has an interesting study. He compared two theories. One is the social penetration theory by Altman, and the other is the uncertainty theory by Berger. Berger is a sociologist. Okay, so social penetration theory would predict that as intimacy grows, as people get closer to each other in a relationship, types of questions would change from descriptive to evaluative. So in a communication, sometimes we ask questions to each other, okay? So at the very start, I would choose to ask questions for mundane issues, unimportant issues, and I just want to know what the issue is, what the state of the other person is. So a descriptive question means, for instance, it's something like this. How did you do in the last exam? Okay, I want the other person to describe his state, and he might say, I got a grade of 85, let's say. Okay, so this describes his or her situation. That's all. So this is simple question answer to know the state of the arts. But in time, according to social penetration theory, the quality of questions might change. Okay, types of questions would change from descriptive to evaluative. Evaluative means that the question asking person is trying to understand the ideas, evaluations of the other person. What do you think about Kürşat Hoca's exam? Now, this requires an evaluation of an object, the exam of Kürşat Hoca, okay? Now, it gets deeper. The communication gets deeper. So, according to Ayres, if social penetration theory is correct, this should be the natural development of the communication between two people. But another point is that the number of questions asked might change, okay? How many questions the communicator asks might change, but social penetration theory actually does not have any prediction, because social penetration theory thinks, or social penetration theory proposes that it's the rewards and costs which develop the intimacy of the relationship and the depth of the communication. So according to social penetration theory, we cannot predict whether people ask more or less questions, okay? The other theory, uncertainty theory by Berger, predicts that asking questions would be a function of uncertainty in initial interaction. So when you first get into interaction with another person, you don't know anything about him or her, okay? So this is uncertainty. What kind of a person is this person? You do not know. How he or she thinks about certain issues, you do not know. So there's much uncertainty at the start of the communication, the first interaction, okay? So this theory predicts that asking questions would be a function of uncertainty, and uncertainty will be high at the very start. So more questions in the beginning of the interaction would be asked than later times, because as you ask more and more questions, uncertainty reduces. And up until uncertainty reduces, you have to ask many questions, okay? So when the uncertainty is very much reduced, you stop asking many questions. But just contrary to social penetration theory, uncertainty theory cannot predict type of questions, because what type of question you ask is not related to how much uncertainty you experience in initial interaction. Keep this in mind, in initial interaction, not as the relationship advances. So what are the results? The results show that when strangers are put into a verbal discussion, they asked more descriptive questions and received more descriptive answers in return. This is 53% of the time. Then they asked evaluative questions and received evaluative answers. So at the initial interaction, you meet someone new and you try to learn about him. At the very start, people choose descriptive answers and the other person chooses to provide descriptive answers in return. That's it. So you ask, what did you get from the last exam? She says 80 out of 100, full stop. That's the end of the conversation, okay? She doesn't start saying, she doesn't provide evaluative answers anymore. Actually, the exam was very hard. I didn't like the ways he asked the questions. No evaluations involved. Descriptive questions, descriptive answers. 53% versus 9%. Only 9% of the participants asked and received evaluative answers. So this fits to the idea of social penetration theory, prediction of social penetration theory. And more importantly, in this study, there were not only stranger-to-stranger pairs or dyads, there were friend dyads, friend to friend. Friends know each other well. Their relationship is already deep, okay? When their relationship is deep, it's more likely that they're going to ask each other evaluative questions. They want to know how they think about a social issue. So, as you observe here, friends asked and received answers both in descriptive and evaluative types, okay? But there were no differences in all the study. There were no differences for questions asked in time. No number of questions didn't change. The amount of questions didn't change. Now, this is a very good experiment which shows that social penetration theory seems to explain the pattern of communication in the initial interaction between strangers and friends better than uncertainty theory. So we're not simply asking because we want to know about other people. Yes, we want to know about other people, but we actually provide and receive rewards in communication, which gets deeper and which makes the communication deeper and deeper in time. So being a stranger is initial interaction, but being friends means that these two people have a past of friendship, so they have a deeper relationship. In deeper relationship, we share deeper ideas with each other. So that's a good experiment, I believe. How do we observe self-disclosure in marriage? Now, that's an important question. And one specific finding is that as couples disclose themselves more to their partners, their marital satisfaction increases. So to put it in the other way around, marital satisfaction increases in time if there is more disclosure between the couples. Now, that's the very raw finding, but an important finding. It shows the importance of verbal communication in marriage. And self-disclosure especially predicts satisfaction even after controlling for income level, self-esteem level, and years of marriage. So it doesn't make any difference whether you are married for 2 years or 10 years. It doesn't make any difference in your satisfaction. The difference comes from the way you exchange information about yourself to your partner, okay? It's not related to your self-esteem or the self-esteem of your partner, okay? It's not related to how much money you make monthly, okay? So after controlling for these, even controlling for these important factors, which might influence marital satisfaction, it is the way that people self-disclose or communicate themselves to their partners. In another study by Hansen and Schutt, disclosure received from the spouse and disclosure to spouse. So disclosure received from the spouse is this. He says something personal about himself to her. This is disclosing oneself to the spouse. And she says something about herself to him. This is disclosure to spouse. So disclosure received and disclosure to. spouse. Both were measured, as well as marital satisfaction from both wives and husbands. Now, what are their findings? Husband's marital satisfaction was positively associated with his disclosure to wife and wife's disclosure to him. So it seems that in heterosexual couplings in marriage, men is not only satisfied by their self-disclosure to the woman, but they also expect disclosure from women to themselves. And if both conditions are satisfied, men feel more satisfied in the marriage. If you look at wife's status, wife's marital satisfaction was positively associated with her disclosure to husband. Now, that's an important distinction between men and women. Wives seem not to expect disclosure from men as far as they can disclose themselves, as far as they can share their personal information with their husbands, they feel satisfied. Now, that's an important difference, I believe. And another important finding in this study is that the discrepancy between husbands and wives' disclosure levels. What does that mean? So this is husband, this is wife. Husband shares a lot, wife shares a lot. Now this is similarity. Husband shares a lot, wife shares a little, or vice versa. Now this is a discrepancy. Now when there is a discrepancy, it means that one side receives more rewards and takes more risks in the relationship, okay, when there's discrepancy. So this discrepancy was negatively associated with satisfaction. So if there is a mismatch between the amount of information communicated by one of the partners to the other, okay, if there's a mismatch, now this is a source of dissatisfaction in the relationship. Why? Most probably the answer is the reciprocity norm. When you reveal secrets of yourself, when you reveal your personal ideas to another person, now it means that you are trusting the other person, you trust the other person, you open up. It means that it's possible that all your weaknesses and negative sides can be viewed by the other person. This creates a status difference between two people, okay? Trusting creates a status difference. The control, when you disclose yourself, the control is delegated to the other partner. But if the other partner shares her or his personal information, now the control is delegated to the other partner. So there's a balance between the other two people in the relationship. But if somebody discloses a lot, opens up a lot, takes the risks of being rejected, let's say, but the other does not, now this person loses control in the relationship, and this person has the high status. So if this reciprocity does not exist, if both disclose to each other in similar levels, then there is a problem in the relationship resulting in lowered satisfaction. Self-disclosure means that you talk about yourself, which might include some subject matters which might be sensitive for the relationship. These sensitive issues are called taboo topics, okay? Taboo means something is prohibited, and in a close relationship, people may feel uneasy about talking some topics because they might feel that they're talking about these issues might impair their relationship. So in an interaction, what we mean by taboo topic is that an interaction topic is perceived as off limits. So I can't talk this with her, or it's not possible for me to talk this with him. Okay, off limits to one or both of the relationship parties. Okay, so these taboo topics is closely related to our needs, which balance each other in a given relationship. In any relationship, partners seek to have both autonomy and interdependence. So you would like to be interdependent, but being too much interdependent with another person might make you feel you are losing your individuality, so you would like to be a little bit autonomous. So you should create a balance between autonomy and interdependence in the relationship. Another balance should be between the predictability of the partner and novelty. If a person is unpredictable, you know that we do not like unpredictable events. We avoid them, okay, because social perceivers would like to have predictability in constructing social reality. But if there's no predictability, it is disliked. If there's too much predictability, nothing to discover, explore, nothing new. Okay, it's boring, in other words, to put it simply. So there should be a balance between predictability and novelty. We should be able to predict each other in a relationship to a certain extent, but from time to time, there should be something which is new in any partner so that it may, excite the relationship again. And the third need is about openness and closedness. We would like to open up ourselves, okay? We would like to show other people what kind of people we are as much as truthfully possible, okay? But sometimes we want to close ourselves to the other person because of expecting negative reactions. If we close ourselves too much, that's a problem. If we open up, that's another problem. So there should be a balance between openness and closeness. And the final tension between openness and closeness is closely related to the issue of taboo topics, because we can examine how openness and closeness might influence a relationship by simply studying taboo topics. Now, as compared to self-disclosure, which is concerned with disclosing information about the self, taboo topics might include any information about the self, the others, or the relationship itself. So in a relationship, a taboo topic can be something about myself, it can be something about my partner, it can be something about any third person which might influence us, okay? Or it can be, the very topic can be the relationship between us, okay? So this is different than disclosing yourself. It includes disclosing self-related information, but it also includes sharing information which is about others, or which is related to people other than the self or the relationship itself. So it gets a little bit trickier, okay? So in this study by Baxter and Wilmot, they studied with 40 male and 50 female participants with 3 types of heterosexual relationships. And they conducted an interview study. It was a qualitative study, okay? It's not experiment, not correlational. It's simply verbalized ideas of these people. 40 male, 50 female participants who have 3 different types of heterosexual relationships. One, a platonic friendship, meaning that the person has a platonic friendship, means that he or she has a relationship without any expectation to transform it into a romantic relationship, okay? So this is simply friendship without expecting any future romantic involvement. The other type was romantic potential. In this kind of relationship, the people felt that there is a mutually perceived state of the relationship as more than friends, but there is not yet a romantic relationship established. So that's why it's called romantic potential. And the third type was the romantic relationship, in which both parties explicitly and mutually were romantic. They know that they are involved in an intimate romantic relationship. Now, in these different people with having different types of relationships, they were asked about which topics they didn't want to talk with their partners, either as a friend or a potential or as a true intimate partner. And their responses were content analyzed. So what they said was analyzed and categorized, in other words, and 7 categories appeared or reported by the participants, what they do not like to talk as a taboo topic. State of the relationship was the most frequent response. So people most of the time wouldn't like to talk about the state of the relationship. They refrain communicating on this issue, which is followed by extra relationship activity, or followed by relationship norms, prior relationships, conflict-inducing topics, negatively valenced self-disclosure, saying something about myself which has a negative content, it means. So, and there were some uncategorized, miscellaneous, muhtelif, çeşitli topics. First thing to say is that there were no significant gender differences in the mean number of reported taboo topics. So both men and women have taboo topics in their minds, but the number of taboo topics are equal across men and women, okay? But important point in this study is that state of the relationship is a taboo topic. Now, that's a problem because from time to time, people should talk about the state of the relationship. And if there's a problem, communication is required to solve these problems. And across relationship types, the only difference was observed in the state of relationship topics, especially being high in romantic potential and romantic relationships, okay? So when romance is involved in a heterosexual couple, now relationship itself becomes taboo. And they stated 5 kinds of reasons. The first one is that talking about the state of the relationship might destroy the relationship, okay? People would like to maintain their relationship, and if they have a conflict just because of talking about the state of the relationship, it can be dissolved. So they fear a dissolution, so they don't talk about the state of the relationship. Second reason stated was that if they talk about a taboo topic, it might feel bad about talking. So this is individual vulnerability category. So if I start talking about the relationship, I might feel bad about it, okay? I feel myself vulnerable for doing this. The third reason was that it might understand without talking. The partner might or should understand me without talking. This is called the tacit mode category. So this is typical mind reading expectation, okay? My partner should understand how I feel now. So this is a blockage in communicating about relationship. The fourth one is talking would not change the future of relationship. Futility of talk. Konuşmak boşa. So if a relationship is going bad, and if you believe that your partner will not understand when you start talking about the state of the relationship, it seems futile and you simply don't talk because it wouldn't change anything. And a final reason was that talking would increase closeness, especially in platonic friendship and romantic potential. The state of the relationship might start to transform into some sort of romantic involvement, and people might feel afraid of getting on this next step, okay? So if people start talking about the relationship, this is cueing each other about, okay, I would like to get more involved, more intimate with you. So this gives an idea to the other person. If you talk about relationship, the idea to the other person that you want to be more involved and intimate with this person. So this might be risky, you might be rejected, so people don't talk about these, the state of the relationship, if talking would increase closeness in platonic friendship and romantic potential types of relationships. And people avoid these topics to prevent, especially, of course, negative consequences. So this is ironic. In order to solve the problems, you should talk about the state of the relationship. But if you don't talk about the state of the relationship, how are you going to solve the problems? Now, this is a vicious circle, which you should keep in mind in problem in relationships with having certain problems. So verbal communication, if disrupted, can become a problem, a threat to the satisfaction of the relationship. Now, this topic avoidance or taboo topics was investigated by other researchers in the context of the felt closeness to the other person and the relationship characteristics. Now, what Dillow et al. Found, for instance, that as the number of reasons individuals report for topic avoidance increase, if you have more reasons for avoiding to talk about taboo topics, in other words, the relational closeness they experience decrease. Now, that's important. So as social penetration theory states that in order that the relationship gets more intimate, deeper, and if people want to feel more close to each other, they should talk about each other more, and especially about taboo topics. So closeness is lost when communication is broken. And when individuals avoid topics to protect themselves from awkwardness, I don't want to feel awkward, tuhaf hissetmek istemiyorum. Excuse me, okay. And when they avoid topics because they do not believe that their relational partner could or would respond appropriately, feelings of closeness in the relationship are significantly reduced. Meaning, if we don't believe that we will receive good responses, let's say, or positive responses from the other person, we avoid topics for many reasons, okay? And people avoid discussing the state of the relationship or personal shortcomings, personal problems in developing the relationship with their romantic partner when they are dissatisfied. So again, if a person is dissatisfied with the relationship, they avoid discussing the state of their relationship or personal shortcomings with their romantic partner for two reasons. One, they feel they are not getting what they feel they deserve in the relationship. So if the person feels that I deserve more from my partner in the relationship, but I don't receive what I deserve, so it's now used to talk with her or him. So reasons for topic avoidance increases. And the other reason is that they perceive few rewards from their relational involvement, okay? They don't think they are rewarded in the relationship. And remember, being rewarded in the relationship also enhances communication with the partner. And finally, when individuals feel that they are not getting what they deserve in the relationship, but yet perceive a number of obstacles to exiting that relationship. So I feel I don't get what I deserve in this relationship, but it's not easy to break the relationship, break up. Okay, perhaps this is just imagine this example. Two people are married. Actually, they have a bad relationship, and one of the partners in the marriage, wife or the husband, feels that he or she doesn't get what he or she deserves, but he wants or she wants to divorce, but it's not possible, perhaps because they are financially interdependent, okay? Then the more they seem to feel that it would be pointless to talk with his or significant other. So this is being trapped in the relationship. You want to exit, you believe you don't get what you deserve, but you can't exit the relationship, then you even more and more stop talking. So this is a dissolution in time, okay? Okay, let's stop here, and then we will go on with the rest of the topic in the next hour.